Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EVN Disrupt podcast. My name is Nijda Tsaturyan, and I'm the editor of the Creative Tech section here at EVN Report. Today, my guest was Lilit Nersisyan, a PhD in bioinformatics and the founder and director of the Armenian Bioinformatics Institute. We spoke about what bioinformatics is, how she founded ABI, the commercialization of science, and how she plans to develop the bioinformatics sector in Armenia. Lilit, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for inviting.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to have you in the studio today because I think this is the podcast that I'm going to learn the most from. I've been interested in this topic of bioinformatics for a while now. But before we get into all that and before I ask you to explain to us what bioinformatics is, let's start with a little bit of your background. Can you tell me about your education and where you went to school?
I went to school to two places, but starting from the fourth grade, I went to Anania Shirakadze Lyceum, which was a quite accidental decision from my parents and quite a good one because I really learned a lot from that school.
It's a science-oriented school, is that right? Or?
Starting from the seventh grade, you choose among two directions. It's either humanitarian sciences or STEM.
Natural
sciences, yeah. So I chose the natural sciences direction. Basically there were a lot of deep educational programs in biology, in math, in physics.
And then where'd you go to university?
I went to the biological faculty of the Yerevan State University, which was quite a surprise for all of my physics teachers, biology teachers, etc. So like a lot of people were, it was quite trendy in that time. If you're good in math, then you go to Yerevan State Applied Math faculty to become a programmer, or if you're good at biology, you become a doctor.
What year was this?
It was 2006.
Okay.
I just wanted to become an, ecologist. So I chose the biological faculty, and my parents were actually both biologists, and my mom was a graduate from the same faculty, the biological faculty. So she tried to convince me not to go there.
Yeah.
But
what was her reasoning?
Like after the Soviet Union collapsed, they didn't continue working in their specialization. So they just knew that that's
the future for a scientist in Armenia was not very
bright.
Right? Yeah. So, and then you graduated, you studied biology at Yerevan State, and then where'd you do your graduate work?
After that, I actually in the third grade, I accidentally discovered my future PhD supervisor. So
Your third year at university.
Third year at university, yeah. So I started visiting the Institute of Molecular Biology, where I learned a lot of wet lab experimentation, and in the future I will tell maybe later the bioinformatics group was established. But the graduate work I did in the State Academy of Sciences, it was an interdisciplinary center for masters in biotechnology. One of the year was simultaneous because it was a 2-year master's program, and in the second year I went to American University of Armenia to study computer science. So I got my master's from these two biotech and computer science majors.
So one of your masters was in biotechnology and the other one was in computer science from AUA. Okay. And is it at this point that you started discovering bioinformatics?
I started discovering bioinformatics in 2011 or maybe in 2010. Arsen Arakelian in the Institute of Molecular Biology, he opened the bioinformatics group. We initially started in the same direction as it was that existed at that time. It was molecular dynamic simulations and trying to understand the three-dimensional structures of proteins. We started with the familiar Mediterranean fever, which is known as Yerevanian disease for Armenians. So the protein that's responsible for the development of the disease, its structure was unknown. So we started in the direction of discovering that structure. It was more of biophysics, etc. So genomics was not our number one priority when the group was formed. But I remember that I was struggling with some Python scripts because the program that I was running had these scripts and I needed to make modifications to those. And it was quite hard for me. I didn't understand anything. Then we were writing a grant and my supervisor asked me to write something about computer specifications, and I had no idea what computer consists of, like a monitor, a keyboard, etc. How do you deal with these things? So I just typed Wikipedia computer just to understand how to name the parts. And at that point, I understood that I really need a computer science education. And it was actually also a second thought of finding another job. Because honestly, at some point I was thinking of leaving science because I didn't have enough salary to sustain myself. So it was, okay, I will start computer science. I will either be a good bioinformatician or I will have a second choice of
being a software engineer.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you're at AUA and YSU, you're completing your master's. At what point did you decide that you were going to take the academic route and go do your PhD and become a researcher?
I didn't choose. I didn't make the decision. So I did both. Unfortunately, at some point in my life, I had to study at two places and work at two places at the same time. So my computer science education enabled me to do a freelance work. So I was a freelance Java developer at a US company. And at the same time, I was doing my academic work at the Institute of Molecular Biology.
The Institute of Molecular Biology is in YSU, right?
No, it's a Academy of Sciences.
National Academy of Sciences. Okay.
Yeah, so I was doing both of the things simultaneously, but then eventually, of course, software engineering was not interesting for me. It was just a means for financial income. And while I was getting experienced in bioinformatics, and we already gradually switched to the genomics side of things, which became much more interesting for me, honestly, I started to freelance for actual bioinformatics work. So I could kind of switch from pure software engineer to bioinformatics freelancing, which was not okay again, because you need to spend a lot of time on your PhD or writing a research, etc. But at least you also gain some experience in the...
At least it's closer to your field.
Yeah. And
is there a big market for bioinformatics freelancers?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So basically the world is... the technological revolution that happened or maybe like 20 years ago has enabled a lot of biologists to produce enormous amounts of data. And unfortunately, the academic system was not fast enough to catch up. And a lot of biologists find themselves that they need to analyze the data and they don't know how. So there's a lot of gap there. And
So they have to go out and find the people that can do it. There's just not enough manpower.
Exactly.
Okay, and then during your PhD, what were you specifically focusing on?
My PhD was devoted to an interesting part of our DNA, the end of our DNA. It's called telomeres. And people have decades ago discovered that these ends are gradually shortening as the cells divide. So it was quite interesting for me. And I was reading a paper where it was telling, okay, while these ends are shortening, maybe there's something happening to how our genes are expressed. And I was interested, okay, how is this shortening associated with the aging process? So we didn't have the opportunity to actually do experimental work. We did, but the things that we could do were quite limited. At the time. To my surprise, my supervisor told me that I can actually download some data from the web. And it was interesting because, okay, you can download the data from the web and there was no algorithm to actually analyze it. So you have to develop the algorithm from scratch. For this particular purpose. And it was maybe the first time I was developing something like that. So we developed the algorithm, we started analyzing the data, and my PhD topic was more like not only studying the length of the telomeres and how they shorten, but also going deep into understanding the processes that maintain the length of telomeres, which are important for cancer development.
Right. Before we dive deeper into the Armenian Bioinformatics Institute, let's talk about what bioinformatics is so everybody, myself included, gets a better idea. Can you explain, like I'm not a bioinformatician, what bioinformatics is?
Yeah, I'll try.
Okay.
So imagine you go to the lab.
Yeah.
And you can do two things. I will make it very, very simple. Maybe the bioinformaticians will be mad at me, but you go to the lab, and what you do and what you imagine you would do, you would look into a microscope and see some cells under the lens and try to understand, okay, why is the cell from this healthy person looks different from the cell from a person suffering from a disease, and you kind of come up with some inferences. But now imagine that you can actually just break down the cell, take out the DNA, and of course you cannot look at the DNA because it's small, etc. But you have a equipment that enables you to read the sequence of the DNA, and you not only have access to the DNA, you have access to all the different molecular types in the cell. There are lots of them, right? So the genes are in our DNA that get expressed, meaning other molecules are produced from the information encoded in our genes, and these are the molecules can either be called RNAs or they can be called proteins, etc. This is a complicated stuff that's happening inside the cell, but due to the revolutionary technologies that have appeared some years ago, you can actually read all this information. So you just put that stuff into the equipment, and what you get out is data, which is a sequence of the of like these molecules are like long strings of monomeres that read into some strings of translated into strings of letters, and then you can also have like the amount of different molecules, the abundance of different molecules, the interaction, and all the different stuff in the digital format. So what you get out of this equipment is maybe terabytes of data on a disk or an other carrier. And again, you are faced with the same question. For example, you have 10 people, 10 healthy people, and you have 10 people suffering from a certain type of cancer. And what you get, the information you get is millions of different features, billions of letters in your DNA, millions of molecules, each with number associated with their abundance in the cell. And you need to understand which of these features, which of these millions of features is associated with the development of the disease.
Right.
That's a very hard problem, and it's not solved with statistical methods. Why? Because the classical statistics assumes that you have a lot of people and much fewer number of features. And this is where the classical statistics works. Where right now you have millions of features and only 20 people. What do you do with that? And this is where you need to be creative. You can apply statistical methods, you can apply machine learning methods, but you need to have deep knowledge in biology. So you need to have deep domain knowledge, because you also need to combine knowledge with the statistical methods in order to make this work. Otherwise, you will have no solution to this problem. There is no math or analytical or statistical or machine learning solution to this problem. So this is where a bioinformatician steps in.
Are the type of algorithms that you as a bioinformatician use completely different and developed by bioinformaticians? Or do you use some classical algorithms, but then the ability to analyze that requires your deep domain knowledge of biology? Or is it a completely different set of algorithms?
That's a good question. The answer is all of
the above.
All of the above. So that there are different combinations. A lot of there are different flavors to a bioinformatician. A bioinformatician can come from a biology background, or can come from a math background, or from a computer science background.
Okay.
A lot of biologists, they kind of switch to the bioinformatics part, and of course for the majority of them it's the using the tools that are available. So basically ability to run those tools. Some of them are in graphical user interface, so it's easier, just you click on the buttons. Sometimes, but some of them are just on the command line. So you have this black screen, you need to type in white letters. And first of all, it's a psychological bottleneck because
it looks intimidating.
The first time I looked at the terminal, I was crying because it was so scary for me. It's like black screen, white letters. Why is it that? And they learn to use these tools, and actually it's like important for them to understand, okay, you have an input to your tool, then you get an output. How you deal with this output? Do you provide it to another tool? Do you filter it out, etc.? So there's a lot of work there. Even like if you just learn to use the tools, you need to understand how to make the pipeline work, like the order of different tools. And people that are able to actually develop the algorithms or develop the software are much more rare. And that's unfortunate because we need these people in the field of biology. So they are able to understand the problem, and they are able to bring this like latest developments in the math
in computer science world.
In computer science worlds to the field of biology. And sometimes you understand, when you talk to different biologists, you understand that they are sometimes reinventing the wheel. Sometimes using the wrong algorithm, and sometimes writing a code that is not reproducible because they are not specialists in that field. And it is very important for the development of science in the world that these people meet.
So it's a very interdisciplinary field. So in a traditional bioinformatics education at the undergraduate level, let's say, is it almost like a double major in computer science and biology? Or is it much more specialized?
I think it is not so standard. Like there are a lot of master's programs, and the bachelor level programs are only recently developing.
So it's more at the graduate level.
So these are programs in bioinformatics. And depending on whether this program is developed in a university based on computer science, it is more courses are more in a computer science, and a couple of like intro to like biology 101 or molecular biology 101, etc. And in the biology departments, it's the other way around.
In the typical world of biology research today, like wet lab research, are bioinformaticians at this point involved in basically every research project, or is it still a bit separate? Are there research teams that don't involve bioinformaticians, or is it a standard part of the process today?
All of the above again. So there are some institutes where you have a bioinformatics core facility, they call. So this is a facility with a couple of bioinformaticians sitting in a room, and whenever a biologist upstairs has a lab and produces the data, they come to this bioinformatician. And the core facility usually does some standard analysis on this. Some of the labs have bioinformaticians. Like if it's a lab with 20 biologists and one bioinformatician, then that poor bioinformatician has to analyze
all the data.
all the data. And maybe I think in most of such labs, the bioinformatician themselves don't have luxury of having their own research project. Like,
so they have to join
constructing a story from the beginning to the end. But more and more, for example, I've been very lucky in my postdoctoral lab. There people learn to perform their project from the beginning to the end. The biologists learn to analyze their own data, and the bioinformaticians, for example, I don't have a wet lab experience, so I pair with a wet lab experimentalist, so it's kind of becomes a joint project. I've also done my PhD under co-supervision of a lab in Germany. And there, people, all of the people are bioinformaticians. So it really depends.
Okay. Let's get into the story of the Armenian Bioinformatics Institute. So last year in February, I believe, you founded the Armenian Bioinformatics Institute, and you're also currently the director of it. Tell me about how you came about the idea of starting a bioinformatics institute in Armenia.
It has a long background if we go back to 2011, when the bioinformatics group was formed. So the work that we were doing was quite interesting. From 2011, I think to 2015, it was only me and my supervisor in the group. So everything was fine, but the sad thing was that I was sometimes living, like sitting in the room alone, and there was no one to talk to. And this is not very efficient for the science to develop, because you need an environment and you need people to talk to each other.
So you were one of the only people at the time doing bioinformatics.
Yeah. And then, of course, like we were trying to reach out to some scientists abroad to have collaborations, to like produce the data that we need for our story. We were writing letters, so I was like asking my boss to write the letter because it will be more official, but we didn't have a website that would tell, hello, we are this group, we are doing this, you can find out the details under this link, right? So these details are important. So I developed a website, a simple WordPress website, and it was quite funny that due to this website, another girl from Denmark found us. She just Googled and found a bioinformatics group, and she joined the group.
Was she Armenian?
Yeah. And the group was growing. It was like in 2011, it was already 4 or 5 people, but with a couple of alumni already having left the group. But like this development from 2011 to 2021, even though like we were doing solid research, we had a lot of collaborators, and everything was solid. Despite the good science that we were doing, I think the best, counting the circumstances, the growth was not satisfying, right? And I was thinking of all the different ways that's possible to kind of make the thing bigger. At the time, I was doing my postdoc in Sweden, so when I left, I had the plans to come back, but I was thinking, okay, I will come back. Maybe I will establish my own junior research group and continue with the standard academic developments
At the Molecular Biology Institute?
Yeah, that was the plan. Of course, I was thinking, okay, maybe I will try to include students, engage students into research projects of collaborators abroad, making it more international so that there's more exposure for them. But it was all in the frames of Institute of Molecular Biology. And then the funny thing was, I was thinking of how to solve the problem with these procurement laws. This is quite an impediment for scientists in Armenia to buy reagents for their own research, because you need to go through a very lengthy bureaucratic process.
Is that like biohazardous material, things of that nature? Or?
Anything, even buying a pen.
Oh, okay.
Anything. Even like things were not difficult enough before that. With this procurement law, you cannot compete with the world developments. And I was trying, okay, what scheme is possible so that you everything in a legal sense, right?
Yeah.
But you don't suffer from that, and you are able to collaborate. And while I was thinking about all these different schemes, I don't know how the idea of you need to have a separate institution for this. You cannot be free, you cannot be flexible enough in an academic institution.
Oh, I see. The procurement's regulations were for the university?
For any governmental organization.
Governmental body, okay.
Yeah,
But
even
the
if
university is since it's state funded, it counts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe there are some thoughts to change the law, but even if you get money not from a governmental source, even if some person donates you the money, you still need to spend it in. So all these thoughts were kind of hinting that you need to establish a separate institution. Another problem was that you cannot have a person working in a governmental organization which is not a resident of Armenia. And the growth that I had in mind, the exponential growth that we needed, was not enabling us to grow in an organic manner only using the Armenian workforce.
Right.
You needed a very fast flow and very intense flow of people from abroad, and you cannot limit yourself with, you become resident, then only then you have an official affiliation. So
sorry to cut you off, but why do you think those limitations are in place? Because science, I mean, usually countries are begging scientists from abroad to come to their countries and and do their work there because it's so advantageous for that country and those universities to have them. Why does Armenia have such strict and it sounds like backwards laws around that?
That's a good question. I think there is no easy answer to that. Sometimes, of course, all those laws are kind of like precautionary laws, so that you don't have corruption, that you don't have, etc., etc. So you need to be very careful, of course. And I guess every country goes through this, so it's a very hard bureaucratic process, and then you make it easier and easier as the
Years go by.
yeah, maybe as the level of your confidence increases, or there are new mechanisms so that they reduce the risk. I don't know, for example, for this procurement law, when you have a scientific environment, a very healthy scientific environment, where the main motivation of people is to publish, get your science out, etc., it is self-regulating. You can most of the scientists just don't do that because they're not motivated to.
They have good salaries and
they have good salaries, etc. So once you have that healthy environment, the risks are reduced, and you can also maybe make the rules less tight.
Okay.
And I guess we're not there yet in Armenia.
Okay, I see. Please continue your thought that I cut off.
So basically this thought of establishing a separate institution was there in place. And also the philosophy of bioinformatics developments in the world. So again, coming back to this revolution that the technologies brought and the educational programs lagging behind led to establishment of bioinformatics institutes in the Western world like 20, 30 years ago. There is the European Bioinformatics Institute, and there are also like separate institutions in European countries, in America, and in different places. And the role of these bioinformatics institutions is just to provide, first of all, ways to store the data sets that are produced in the country, the genomics data sets, etc., to provide algorithmic developments to support different research institutions in the country, and to develop the human workforce.
Are a lot of those private institutions?
No, so like all of them that I know of are governmentally funded institutions.
Private from a university, like they're not affiliated with the university?
I think some of them are, some of them are not. Some of them are virtual entities. So like some of them are called infrastructures, where people are affiliated with different universities, but they are also affiliated with the central infrastructure. So whenever like there is a research project in life sciences that is overlapping the expertise of one of the persons working in this or that institution, then they provide a support to that. So again, all of the above, there are different arrangements in different countries, but there is a significant governmental funding for these institutions. And it would take time to convince the Armenian governmental entities that we also need to establish such an institution. And the calculations that we had, how many people we need to have, how many people we have now, it was apparent that we cannot wait until this realization comes. Right. So we need to kind of establish it ourselves, and then maybe the things will, the collaboration with the government will come later.
So you established this institute in February of last year. What have you guys been working on over the last year, and what have you achieved so far?
Yeah, so of course, having established in the first year will not enable me to talk a lot about research.
Right.
So there was a lot of infrastructural development during the last year. So what we were doing was actually working the first half year, working on developing the community. Of getting people together, telling people what we are doing. So like we were talking to different people, finding biologists in the diaspora, and it was an interesting discovery for me that sometimes it's like there is no joint community. Sometimes I was finding a person doing his own research in his own lab, and you just find these people, And the interesting part is that sometimes they just try to do that for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of viral, and then they find their friends,
Yeah.
and their colleagues come, etc., etc. So by the month of March, there was already like more than 40 people that you were talking to, and I was telling, yeah, we need your support so that the students can learn, can engage into different projects, etc. And then the question was, okay, so we're ready to support. What's next? Where are your students?
Yeah.
And I was, yeah, right. Where are our students? And it was, okay, apparent for me that we need, we had a plan. We had a long 5-year plan. And like we had several projects, but some of them were educational, although our main purpose was not to be an educational institution. We were there to do research,
Right.
to produce people that would then feed the industry. That was our ultimate aim. But the educational programs were somewhere there. But the question that these people raised, where are your students, brought this educational program into number one priority.
Right.
So I was, okay, we need to have a summer school. And we need to have a summer school, which is not like other summer schools, like 2-3 weeks long, that are just for networking purposes most of the time. We need to have an intense summer school because students in Armenia that have biology background or computer science background, since there is no genomics environment, they don't really know what bioinformatics is. It sounds fancy.
Right.
Right?
I want to be a bioinformatician.
Yeah,
Because it
yeah.
sounds very nice.
I want to do some magic
Right.
and things can cure people.
Right.
That's, but they don't really know what that is.
Right.
And sometimes I had, before establishing the Armenian Bioinformatics Institute, I tried to deliver lectures and doing some popular things. And I remember a funny story. I delivered a lecture once about bioinformatics, telling what it actually is. A student, like before this lecture, there was a student who tried to find internships in bioinformatics. And then after listening to my lecture, he called me and said, okay, after your lecture, I understood that I don't want to get engaged into bioinformatics, which is quite important because people don't, it's important for them to understand what it really is, right? So yeah, I'm kind of jumping back and forth. Yeah, so we needed this long summer school that will tell people what bioinformatics is, and our intention was that maybe part of them will love it and they will stay in it. It was like a significant part of them that loved it eventually, but that's another topic. So
were those participants either from biology or computer science, or did some of them have the interdisciplinary education of both biology and CS?
Yeah, no. So they were either from biology, from medicine, or from computer science. So interdisciplinary education was not there at the moment.
This was last year, right?
This was last year, yeah. We had 47 applicants, and it was strange because 11-week long summer school where you need to be there like 7 hours a day. It's kind of full-time job.
Yeah.
During the summer when all the students want to rest. We didn't expect 47 applicants. It was quite motivating. We chose 20 of them and we started working. It was very hard work, and the PhD students of the former bioinformatics group that I was involved in did a very hard job of finding all the educational resources, online materials, putting things together. And we had quite some intense program of self-learning, peer-to-peer education, and 38 speakers from 11 countries. They were like giving lectures at the end of each day. So it was an exposure, quite an exposure for them. And we had the retention of 10 students after the school. They are still like coming to the institute every day. Each of them is involved in a research project.
Okay.
And
are they graduate students?
Most of them are at the bachelor level.
Okay.
And this kind of highlights the gap that we have in Armenia. So you have a lot of motivated, enthusiastic, and talented students at the level of bachelors. Then they leave the country, or they switch to, if they're from computer science background, then they switch to IT sphere. So in the master's level, it is very hard to find people.
Yeah.
in the PhD level,
Yeah, it's even
it's
harder. Or
it's even harder.
Yeah.
So when we started the Armenian Bioinformatics Institute, we had only 2 people in Armenia that had a PhD
in
the field.
bioinformatics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we count the needs in Armenia,
Were you
we
one of
need
those
30.
2 people?
I was one of those 2. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's really tough.
during the summer school, of course, the supervisors were told that if you have a research project, please provide the topic to the students, and so the students were told, okay, if you find the topic of the researcher that you hear the lecture about interesting, that you can refer to this researcher, and this is how these research projects were formed. But another interesting development happened outside of the summer school. I was talking to my friend at the Harvard University, and he was doing a genetic engineering research by then, and he was interested in how we can collaborate with the Armenian Bioinformatics Institute. This discussion led to an idea of another program. We call it the Mentor and Mentee program. Basically, he is a life science researcher involved in a very interesting topic, but he needed a bioinformatics support. And basically, I told, okay, please describe your research project. I will find a student that can do the data science part of your research. Interestingly enough, at that time, I just got an email from a student at American University of Armenia. She just heard my lecture about bioinformatics before. So she just wrote, okay, can I participate? And I was okay. You can participate. And remembering the prior discussion with Eric from Harvard, I thought maybe I can just put her on this research project. And the idea is that, okay, she provides the data science part, and Eric is engaging her in his own research. So it's kind of both a mentor and a mentee in terms of learning stuff as well as teaching stuff. The problem for me was that all of these research projects, all of these developments were quite overwhelming. And I was myself involved in an administrative staff a lot. So maybe half of my time is now in the administration. It was quite lucky for me when I discovered that this student is quite independent. So she can do Google research. So I tell her, okay, can you do this? And she Googles it and she does that. And she comments her code and she explains it very well to Eric. And in the first time, I was having these weekly discussions, the 3 of us, and I was maybe talking to the student very frequently. But in the end, I understood that they are quite independent. And kind of enables, and this type of developments are everywhere. You attach a student to a researcher, a research supervisor, you tell them, don't worry, we will take care of your student, we will troubleshoot their errors, we will do everything. You just need to spend 1 hour per week just to put them into on the right direction, on the right path. And if you think about that, it's not possible to supervise, even though I have the backing of the senior researchers who are involved with the institute, and I have the backing of the PhD students who can be mentors. It's not possible to get engaged into more than 10 research projects at the same time, doing all this administration stuff, etc. And it is quite amazing how independent these students are. And only that actually allows all this to happen. And we're growing quite fast. And yeah, this growth is actually dependent on the talent that we have here in Armenia.
Part of what you're focusing on is first, I guess, building the community of professionals you need to be able to do this work. Is there any activity at the university level to have a proper bioinformatics master's program or PhD program?
Yeah, so there are different universities. Each of them has a different view on this. There are some developments. That's good news. Initially, the Yerevan State University had a bioinformatics master's, but this bioinformatics master's is again more focused on molecular dynamic simulations. So the genomics program is quite weak there. Russian Armenian University has a department of bioengineering and bioinformatics. It's more biology and more bioengineering rather than bioinformatics yet. But of course, it's switching. It's a 5-year specialist program, so combining bachelor and master's. And the American University of Armenia has recently launched a data science bachelor where there is a bioinformatics track. And this time it is more data science and less biology. So all of these programs, they provide seeds of bioinformatics expertise. They just poise students into this direction, and then the rest of the education is not there in Armenia.
So they can't really continue till their end goal.
Yeah. So this is the gap that we want to fill. Yeah.
And then what research projects have you guys already started? Research projects, or are you still in the community building phase?
So we have started research projects. So the students that are engaged with our activities are either working with their remote supervisors, so bioinformaticians from abroad. They spend quite a lot of time with the students, and they just engage them in their own research.
How did you find those people? Those from abroad?
Networking, human,
Are they mostly Armenians from abroad?
They are mostly Armenians, but interestingly, there are people also that are non-Armenian. I want to stress that the chairman of ABI is a German professor from Leipzig. And they just want to help. And
it's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to hear that.
So, part of them are either involved with these research projects, and we considered that as a training phase for the students. But part of them are already involved in labs. So we have two, one lab that's led by Professor Hans Binder. It's a remotely supervised lab. And then the other one is a junior research group supervised by me. And there are several grants that students are involved in. It's either governmental grants to the Institute of Molecular Biology, so the students are partly affiliated with that institute and our institute, and there are also different one grant from PMI Science that we got recently, and there are some projects that we just do with no funding.
Over the last year, especially since the end of the war, the government in Armenia has spoken about this need for greater funding in science, and I think they increased the budget somewhat last year. Has ABI been able to make use of this increased funding and availability in grants?
Not directly, because ABI is, as a non-governmental institution, has a limited eligibility to all these grant programs. Of course, again, people at ABI are also partly affiliated with governmental organizations, so it's possible to collaborate in this sense.
So indirectly?
Yeah, indirectly, but not directly, unfortunately.
Lilit, I want to talk to you about this idea of commercializing science. Bioinformatics sounds like it is a space that could possibly launch a lot of startups. Have you seen this trend in bioinformatics? Do some of the projects that start in a postdoc or in a PhD lab end up becoming startups, or has bioinformatics not yet matured to that stage?
That's a very good question. So we've had experience of startup developments ourselves, and also noticing other developments. It is very hard for a pure bioinformatics startup to flourish. Most of the times, if it is genomics, then you also need to have the wet lab infrastructure in place. So you need to be both, because bioinformatics software or developments is very hard to sell.
Yeah.
People like buying stuff that's tangible.
Yeah.
And you just cannot sell a software and be happy with that. Of course, there are some exceptions to this rule, but it's very hard. And in order to be successful in these realms, you need to have people. And basically, our main endpoint is not only to do basic research, is to create the human capital that will enable all the biotech companies or startups to get established in Armenia, because you need employees in your
you need
companies,
bioinformaticians in order to be able to build those companies.
Yeah, you need both bioinformaticians, you need experimentalists, you need the whole package. Bioinformatics is just one
piece of it.
One piece, a very important piece, a piece
Yes.
without which you cannot have modern biotech developments in the country. But we realized that it's only one of the pieces.
Yeah.
So there's a need for simultaneous development of all the different things. We have this idea of partnering with industrial companies. We cannot have the luxury, of only doing basic research because there is no industry and there is no motivation for the students to choose the path because they don't have, they don't see any future if there is no marketplace.
Yeah.
And like, as opposed to, for example, tech developments or as opposed to machine learning, etc., where you can establish a basic research lab because you have at least some industrial environment around you.
Yeah, to support you.
Yeah, we need to do everything at once. And it's very important to distribute the resources in a way that your research doesn't suffer. So we have recently had agreements with 3 industrial companies, one in the UK and one in the 2 in the US. And the strategic partnership that we have agreed upon assumes that, okay, these companies fund us so that we develop a team from students, initially beginners in the field, that would learn the skill sets that's needed for the research developments in that company.
Yeah.
And this is maybe a transition phase for these companies. They cannot establish themselves just, okay, I want to have my branch, I have to have my team in Armenia. But if these developments are successful, if these partnerships are successful and the students eventually grow to be independent players in this company, then it can have build the ground for them to at least establish their data science, data analytics part. And the way I imagine in this gradually develops the environment where also other developments take place.
Where bioinformaticians can come in and play a role in all of that.
Yeah.
So that we have a better idea of what a bioinformatics oriented company would look like. What are some examples of problems that startups in the space are working on? For example, is drug discovery a part of the bioinformatics space? And before I let you answer, let me, just for our listeners, speak a little bit about what a drug discovery company is. Over the last, I would say, 5-6 years, there's been a bunch of startups that have come about that do drug discovery work, in the sense that they build these algorithms which, you could speak to this better, but pair different chemical compounds to discover some drug that could work for some disease. Is that an example of a bioinformatics company?
So that is an example of a bioinformatics company, although we again divide the bioinformatics into structural bioinformatics, where you deal with, as you said, the structural basis of drug molecule interactions. And there is the genomic space where you just have big data analysis problems. We do have success stories in the first scenario, where you have this modeling of the interactions and finding drugs and understanding whether they are good interactors for your targets, etc. We have a couple of nice companies already developing in Armenia, which is quite a good news. In terms of genomics and big data analytics, again, there are drug discovery startups, and we also ourselves had some developments in that field. It's not about the modeling the actual interaction of the drug with its target. It's more about finding the target.
Right.
It's more about analyzing this whole data and understanding, okay, which of the target is responsible for your disease. For which target you need to develop the drug. And this is, we had quite some developments in this sense, and we had an idea of a startup. And the main impediment that I personally think was not allowing this to commercialize further was the lack of human workforce. So we needed to find people, and I remember we had some funding, and we tried to find people with quite a nice salary in Armenia, and it was impeding the development. So this is actually also a very important point. So people are telling all the time that, of course, you need to commercialize what you're doing. Basic science is not enough. That's true when you have a critical mass of people. We are not there yet.
I think 10 to 15 years ago, when people were building startups, they were primarily building startups for the web. So you had companies like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and these companies arising in what people called the Web 2.0 space. And during that time, those companies that were being built largely just required a programming background, like a basic computer science background. A lot of them were built by people who didn't even graduate from university. These days, it feels like there's more and more of a trend towards what people call deep tech, which is a startup that is built on something that required some form of research, some sort of innovative engineering that had not been done before. So in order for a startup ecosystem to really blossom these days, I feel like the need for a strong science community is much more important today than it was 15 years ago. And that's something in Armenia, I think, that we really need to work on in order to keep up with the rest of the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think a nice example of that is the work I've been involved in Sweden. So there, the host lab that I worked in was focused on a new technology, and it was basic research in its entirety. So just trying to understand why RNA degrades the way it degrades.
Yeah.
And you cannot explain, like, people when people are asking me, okay, what's your postdoc topic? I'm like, it's very hard to explain to people. And whenever it's very hard to explain, then you know that you're dealing with basic research. Because you cannot understand the applications. But then this technology appeared to be very useful in an applied sense. So again, it's another type of drug discovery door that it opens. So this time it is drugs that interact with the microbes in our organism, so microbiome research. And there you need to have a lot of bioinformatics developments in order to analyze the data that comes from this new technology and apply it to either clinical settings or to drug discovery. So like give access to pharma companies to this technology. And this is a combination of technological innovation that happens in the laboratory with the bioinformatics developments. Both are very important components. And you need to bring those two components to Armenia for these startups to flourish. This is what I understood in Sweden, and this is important for bioinformaticians to understand in Armenia as well. They are very important, and the number of bioinformaticians, like if these 10 students that are with us, and if we continue the developments, then we will have a very, dense population of bioinformaticians here, which is quite rare in the world. But we need to internationalize. We need to collaborate, we need to partner, because without these clicks, this technology is very important and it can open a lot of doors. And just let's develop the bioinformatics side of things. We need to click in order to have biotech commercial developments in Armenia.
Okay, Lilit, I want to ask you our last question. Where do you see both the bioinformatics space in Armenia in 5 to 10 years, and what do you hope to see for the Armenian Bioinformatics Institute in the 5 to 10 year time span?
5 to 10 year time frame is very short.
Okay.
So what we would love to see in 10 years time is having 30 bioinformaticians and maybe 2 biotech companies. That's what we hope for, and that's the most optimistic scenario. But I would tell that maybe it's not realistic. So in 5 year time, our goal is to have 6 labs that are supervised by a PhD level, at least like a doctoral level bioinformatician, coming either from abroad or people that have education in Armenia. 6 research labs that produce maybe 2-3 people per year. This will enable for a couple of biotech companies to get established. So once we have a deep genomics related biotech company in Armenia, that will be an achievement, and I expect that it will happen maybe within a 10-year period.
Time frame. Okay, Lilit, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you'll come back again in the future to talk about the further developments of ABI.
Thanks a lot.
You. Thank you for listening to this segment of the EVN Disrupt podcast. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you consume podcasts. Also, make sure to follow EVN Report on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date for more engaging content from Armenia. Thank you.